Our last signpost is called the memory moment. Now, in a memory moment, also known as a flashback, the author interrupts the flow of the story by letting the character remember something. So, you're not going to be on the same timeline as the story. It's going to interrupt that timeline, and it's going to go ahead and flash back or revisit a memory from the past to help you kind of clear things up. Okay? Now, whenever this happens, you need to kind of ask yourself, why is this memory important, or why is this flashback important? Why is it that the author decided to include this in the story? Okay, there's some kind of importance there for you to figure out. Now, typically a flashback or a memory moment is going to help the reader identify a theme or a conflict, or it could even foreshadow a future event that's to come in the story. Some text clues to look out for would be the character saying, "I suddenly remembered," or "I remember," or even something along the lines of "thinking back." Okay, those are all kind of clue words that let you know that we're going to be going back in time. We're going to be revisiting a flashback or a memory of something that has happened previously. Okay. Now, as I'm looking at my definition, we need to go through on our notes and highlight those words that stick out and the words that are going to be most important to us. So as I'm looking at this definition, the word interrupt is one that we need to go ahead and highlight, because whenever there's a flashback or a memory moment, you're no longer on the same timeline as your story. Okay, it's going to be a break. There's going to be an interruption where you're going to flash back to the past. Okay, so it will kind of interrupt the flow of the story. It will stop for a moment as you revisit that moment and memory. So let's go ahead and look at the next thing. Something else is the word remember, because if they're remembering about it, it's something in the past. So it's important for you to know for a memory moment, something for you to know about a flashback. I'm also going to go ahead and highlight down below theme, conflict, and foreshadow, because a memory moment is really going to help you identify one of these three things. There we go. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our Tuck Everlasting example. Now, this particular quote that was pulled happens in chapter 7 when the Tucks are describing how 87 years ago they stumble across the spring and they finally drink from it. And this is the quote. "That was the time when we figured there was something peculiar. Jesse fell out of a tree, the horse was shot by hunters, but the thing is, they didn't kill him. The bullet went right on through him and didn't hardly even leave a mark. Then Pa got a snake bite. Then Jesse ate the poisoned toadstools." So after reading that quote and looking at it, you need to ask yourself as the reader, why might this memory or flashback be important? Why would the author include this flashback or this memory? So by looking at this kind of quote here, you want to say, okay, they're talking about kind of how things have come to fruition, how things have happened with drinking from it, how they kind of figured out that they could live forever, that they were immortal. So this flashback and this memory is important because it's going to explain to Winnie what drinking from the spring does and how the Tucks came to be everlasting. Okay. Now it's interesting though, because this is also kind of an aha moment for both the reader and Winnie, because we're realizing here that the Tucks cannot die. This is kind of the explanation as to why they didn't want Winnie around the spring, and this is the explanation as to why they went to the extremes to kidnap her. Okay. So go ahead, you need to fill out your notes for this last box here in the first column for Tuck Everlasting. Don't forget, you want to ask yourself your question of why this is important, why it was included. You're not just going to copy and paste this, you need to describe the quote and tell why this quote specifically is going to be an influence for the memory moment. Once you've done that, go ahead and turn to the next page on your blend space, watch your video, and then make sure that you complete your notes for your blend space video explaining how it's an example of a memory moment. And then you're set.